and hear what he has for us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Merrill, Executive Director of the Equality State Policy Center. First of all, I would like to articulate my support for removing the judiciary from this act, removing that amendment. You heard the legal arguments, and also as a practical matter, I think to use the old cliche, I think it would be a poison pill if it remained in the bill, and it would be a huge distraction if the legislature were to consider this bill in session. So my 2 cents on that piece of it. And then, as always, my main concerns and interests have to do with section 913-106, the section that covers official decisions and votes. And it starts on, that section starts on page 8, the bottom of page 8, and continues on to page 9. In my original proposal to this committee, I suggested the following language, and I'll read it again just to kind of re-suggest it and see if we can have another conversation about it. A conflict of interest shall exist when a member of a legislative body, public official, or public employee has a substantial financial interest by reason of ownership of, control of, or the exercise of power over any interest greater than 5% of the value of any corporation, company, association, or firm, partnership, proprietorship, or any business entity of any kind of character which is directly affected by the proposed or pending legislation, or who is an officer or director for any such corporation, company, association, or firm, partnership, proprietorship, or any other business entity of any kind of character which is directly affected by the proposed or pending legislation. And then again, the point of suggesting that was to try to get at what appears to be can be a conflict of interest that legislators sometimes face when they're considering legislation that could directly affect the financial outlook of a business that they own. And so that's the concept behind that language, and so that's why I suggested it in my original proposal, and why I'm suggesting it again to be included in this section if you think that's a good way to go. My other observations about this section, I'll start on page 9, line 2. In line 2, we have the phrase personal or private interest. And in line 3, we have private benefit. Now, these are defined. And in the definitions, they do not include an immediate family member. And you might consider including that language to that effect in this section of the law where you include immediate family members. In line 7 on page 9, we have the phrase clear cases. So, shall abstain from voting only in clear cases of a personal or private interest. That's vague language, and maybe that just relies upon the definition of a private benefit. But again, if we're relying on the definition of a private benefit, you might consider including immediate family members there. And with that, I think you've heard a lot of testimony on this. I think I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman, and stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Merrill, Representative Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Merrill, appreciate you being here today. After our last meeting, you and I exchanged some text messages back and forth about a question that I asked with regards to the level of the state employees who would be covered by this act. And if I remember correctly, you had no opposition to seeing the impact of the act more limited to the higher level public employees and elected officials as opposed to line level employees who really don't have the power to influence a lot of these kinds of decisions. Could you elaborate a little bit about your?
Mr. Merrill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think that if this committee chose to more narrowly define who's included as people who are in positions of power in the government or in agencies, I would not oppose that change.
Other questions? Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Merrill, I found it interesting. I think you were suggesting a change on page 9. I believe it was either line 8 or 9. And could you wanted to add immediate family member, I think. Do you mind just explaining that one more time, the language you wanted to add, if I understood you correctly?
Mr. Merrill.
Mr. Chairman, I guess you could approach this in a couple different ways. One way is you could include immediate family member in the definition of private benefit, which is earlier in the bill. Or if you did not want to include it in the definition of private benefit, then in this section, I think you would need to amend this section to say public, for example, on line 1, page 9, a public member or public employee or immediate family member has a personal or private interest. And then again, add similar language in on line 9, a public official or public member shall not vote to give any money or any direct financial benefit to himself or immediate family member. So that actually goes to line 11.
Anything else, committee? Any other questions or comments from Mr. Merrill? Yeah, I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Merrill, for being with us again today.
Thank you.